Welcome to the Executive Hustle podcast, where I am your host, Kirsten, speaker, author, retired CEO, mother of four, and recovering workaholic. Explore with Central Pennsylvania local executives what it takes to lead well, live well, and learn well. Understanding that leaders cannot survive, let alone thrive, without a spirit of curiosity, a discipline of accountability, and a disposition for vulnerability. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Executive Hustle podcast. Our guest today is Mary Oliveira, President and CEO of the Whitaker Center for Science and Art. But I know that you also introduce yourself as a recovering runner, I think, and also a living organ donor. Two things I will want to be sure that we touch on today. Other things I feel like I've learned about you in the time we've spent together is that you have experience in banking, marketing, business development, and now something near and dear to my heart. You are a nonprofit CEO. There is a great story in there, I know. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you so much. Very excited to be here this morning.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. So one of the ways I open up many of my podcasts thus far, and I actually had a listener comment on it because I didn't do it one time, and she made mention, so thank you for that, is I asked the question, did the 7-year-old Mary want to be sitting where you are today?
Absolutely never fathomed it, most likely.
Okay.
Most likely. I grew up in a very challenging childhood scenario for the first 13 years of my life. And as I emerged from that with family members who transplanted me here to Central Pennsylvania, that I think put on a Shira cape that to this day maybe is more of the invisible cloak on my shoulders, but it was about wanting to reset the wrongs of the world. And so my intentions, as far back as I can remember, was to actually get a degree and go work for the United Nations and save the world. That's all.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And so how did you end up here today?
How did I end up here today? I have been blessed with what I consider, in hindsight, not always necessarily every step along the way while it occurred, a very building block type of career. And I think that both personally and professionally, as they say, fates and the stars aligned to get me here. I cannot say honestly that I ever went to look for the role of a CEO. I think it found me, and it found me at a time when I had capacity, energy, and opportunity between work and family commitments to be able to step into a role that daunting, absolutely, not insurmountable by any stretch. So I think it found me just when we were both ready for each other.
So a perfect fit right now for you where you are.
It's definitely an interesting fit as we continue to navigate settling in year one and having many conversations with colleagues at different levels and certainly other CEOs. As they say, the air at the top of the mountain gets thinner and thinner. So I'm learning a lot where previous roles had me as part of executive or leadership teams and contributing greatly. Now, certainly being at the helm of the ship has a completely different perspective on things.
Yeah, so I can relate completely to that. Last couple statements, both about the air, and I've never heard that one. I may have to steal that one. Lonely at the top is one that resonates with me as well, which is certainly why I do what I do on my day job. Tell me a little bit about stepping into this. So I did notice recently Whitaker just celebrated its 25 years. So this is a legacy organization that's been around. It's done wonderful things for the community. You are coming in as a new CEO, first-time CEO. Tell me about those challenges, personally, professionally. Many leaders, I'm sure, that may be listening are in their first role like this, like you, stepping into a company with a rich history. How did you approach it? What are you still challenged by?
Ooh, let me unpack all of that.
I don't ask short questions.
Travel back in time. to early last spring, and I received a phone call from a recruiter
Yeah.
that the position was available and my name had been brought up. And fortunately, with more than 25 years of leadership experience, mostly centered here in the Harrisburg capital region, I would like to think I have built up a professional reputation amongst all the different roles that I've played for the different organizations that I've worked with and for. And that's what prompted the call from the recruiter. I was a little tentative at first. I knew Whitaker personally. My children have attended field trips and I've been the chaperone. We have memories pop up on Facebook of when we came to see the Nutcracker. Siblings that I have who are in the arts performed here. So there's definitely a depth of connectivity to Whitaker that spans its entirety. My husband and I moved back to central Pennsylvania with our 6-month-old son the weekend before Whitaker opened its doors in 1999.
Mm.
So that's when I think that first seed of interweaving myself with Whitaker probably got planted, and it just took those 25 years for us to come together.
Yeah.
After a thorough search that was done, I was offered the job mid-September of last year. And having become empty nesters 2 years ago with our youngest heading off to make her way in the world, I promised my husband and myself that this would be my decade of discovery. So it would be my time to say yes for me as the first thought of will this work, will this not work, while still gauging, obviously, the family needs, but really being able to put myself first. And it was exciting for me to step in as the first hired president and CEO, female president and CEO in Whitaker Center's history. And I say that not for my resume or my ego. I say that for my 21-year-old daughter. I say that for the 4 or 5 young female professionals who are part of Team Whitaker.
Wow.
I say that for every young woman, including that 7-year-old who never thought that the letters CEO would necessarily be on her business card.
Mm.
So to put another crack in that ceiling, to pave the way, to lead by example, that you can make it your own path and get there if that's what you want to do.
Right.
Those were all critical reasons as to why I said yes to this role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's an important message, I think, both in terms of how you're personally approaching it, but how you're sort of providing that example for the important people in your life. Yeah, that really resonates. So, decade of discovery. I
Yeah.
love that you've given it a name. So that did not escape my listening here. Tell me how that is showing up across your day to day, across your different facets of your life, besides just saying yes to this role.
So there's a lot of content out there about the first daughter syndrome, and I fit most of it to a T. Responsibility, accountability, A-type personality. I tend to, always lead with that yellow lens of let me think about it, let me plan for it, let me make sure I have plan A, B, and C in case something goes awry
Hmm.
before actually stepping up or stepping in. And so wanting to give myself permission to maybe tackle a little bit more of that red, be a little bit more daring, a little bit more of a risk taker. Intentionally wearing orange today as I blend my yellow and reds together. It's definitely not my comfort zone to not have a plan and execute from A to Z, in a very well-intentioned manner. And so giving myself permission, and that decade of discovery was hitting the tender age of 50 3 years ago. So it kind of went hand in hand with, it's a different phase of life. Again, the empty nester time frame and the opportunity to just approach life's pathway with a different lens. And so it's been exciting. It's been scary. It certainly has led me, in places that I didn't expect to go, but I continue to challenge myself to not fall back too much into that pattern of let me think it through and, get lost in all of the consideration and not enjoy the actual action. So
Right. So we're saying yes a lot more is what I hear.
saying yes a lot more.
Yeah, yeah. Saying yes. Well, as a student of improv, that sounds like a lot of fun for me. Saying yes is a big deal there. Tell me about, you've had a lot of leadership roles over the years, and you've mentioned a few of them already. What do you wish you knew about leadership then that you know now, having gone through so many different, wonderful roles that you've mentioned?
Um, I think that it is a fine line. I actually had this question come up recently when I was speaking to a group at a lunch and learn. How do you maintain that balance of your leadership position, but building a cohesive team to reach the goals that you're trying to reach? And it took me longer along my leadership journey to recognize that you can be friendly and it doesn't always equate to having to be their friend.
Yeah.
And as someone who leads with her heart, certainly, and someone who is a wooer in her top 10 Strength Finders assessment, again, those are things that I've had to conscientiously learn how to, I wouldn't say separate necessarily, but make sure that they're in alignment in, appropriate ways when called upon. So you're having to make decisions, you're having to incorporate policies, you're having to execute initiatives that may not always sit well with everyone. And I think someone recently said to me, if you took this job to win a popularity contest, you did it for the wrong reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, the wooer in me struggles with that, but understanding that everything I do, regardless of decisions, initiatives, et cetera, policies, is always done through the lens of positive intent for the greater good and the mission that I am tasked with serving and leading first and foremost. So that's probably been a shift over the years that I have seen come out, in different assessments of my leadership style and values as
Yeah.
well.
So positive intent for the greater good, that is your North Star, your guiding mission. That's
It
what you
absolutely
said.
is.
Yeah.
It absolutely is.
So how does having come to find that you have to have that as your guiding star, regardless of how that may mean you have friends or don't have friends on the team, how has that made you a better leader?
I think it's allowed me to be able to separate the personal and professional when called upon to do it and when the situation, really will benefit from it. An example comes to mind of a previous role that I was in where I had to release a team member from their position. And at the end of the conversation, and we had worked through some, coaching and development methods along the way till we got to what was the inevitable conclusion. At the end of the conversation, he thanked me.
Mm.
He thanked me. How many supervisors, managers, leaders have ever released a team member from position, aka had to fire a team member, and been thanked at the end of the conversation? And words were, you recognized what I couldn't see, not only for the organization, but for what I needed to know. And this was not comfortable for either one of us, but it was necessary. And so for that, I thank you. And that still sticks with me. And that was, goodness gracious, probably 5 or 6 years ago. The clarity of the conversation, him sitting across from me in my desk. And so I bring that with me, in ways that I both try to role model and then also try to disseminate with my leaders and my emerging team members who are stepping into those types of roles so that they too can have that ripple effect on developing people to be comfortable with the truth with charity.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a
Opportunity
good one.
conversation.
Yeah. Have you read the Radical Candor work, Kim Scott's work around, clear is kind, I think is the way Brene Brown says it, but that truthfulness with compassion, of being upfront with somebody about what is reality, but with that level of kindness. And when
Yes.
we don't do that, honesty without compassion is brutality, right? So there's a quadrant of that where we can really go in a negative way. But on the opposite way, sometimes I've seen leaders, because they think they're trying to be so kind, her word for this, I don't tell you the truth because I think I'm being kind by not telling you, is called ruinous empathy. And I think that's just a brilliant way of, if you had let this person linger, what would have been created in the team or in the organization, and this person never gets the opportunity to grow or get feedback. And when they don't know what they don't know, that they're not given an opportunity to get better, and that's the absence of leadership. And I think that is far from being kind.
I would agree. And I think that's where that positive intent for the greater good is where by having that as my North Star, it does allow that separation. Yes, I will always be friendly. That is the type of culture and environment I want, any team I'm a part of to be able to feel they're their best self doing their best work every day.
Mhm.
But a mantra I learned very, very early on in a career that I stepped into my first leadership position in was having to say, I am not paid for you to like me.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I will try to create an environment where that's the case because of who I am as a human being, but it is not why XYZ organization is paying me
Yeah.
here. So it's a slippery slope, but I think that's a tenet I can comfortably say I learned very early on, and it has been a part of my toolkit of leadership hammers and pliers and nails in my tool belt.
What a great toolkit. I think I'm so glad it came out in our conversation because it's such a valuable lesson for leaders to learn early. I think I had my first leadership position at 22, 21. I don't know. I try not to think that far back. And, so many of the people around me were A, my age, and B, had just been my peers and friends, right?
Yes.
And so to not have that lesson, to not know those things, or not have somebody to mentor you through that, the fear of offending your friends, or moving into that phase where you are now their supervisor and not their friend, that's really challenging for somebody so young without training. And so I'm really glad that came out, because I think the more we can get that message out to new managers and new leaders, the better it is for honestly for their employees.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And themselves.
And themselves, for sure, for sure. So you learned a lot of great lessons early. Tell me what you find to be one of your biggest mistakes as a leader. We learn a lot from our mistakes.
We do. We do. I think having gone through some recent mentoring myself, because I believe I'm a lifelong learner at heart, and always try to instill a culture of coaching going in every direction. So receiving it from my direct reports and team members as well. But recently going through some team coaching and recognizing that strategic is my number one strength, has always been in my top 5 in every position, but has changed in its placement as I've grown in executive roles. I sometimes fail to truly explain the method to my madness, is the best phrase I can think of. So I feel very blessed to be able to stand at the starting line and see the finish line and know all of the obstacles that I might encounter and have to overcome along the way to get there. And I can map it out and I can formulate the plan, and I'm off and running, hence that recovering runner in many different ways.
Yes, I still need
Off
that.
and running. And I would love to think that I motivate and encourage, the team to join me on the journey. And I think they do, without always necessarily understanding the methodology behind how I can see
Mm-hmm.
and bring us from A to Z. And so learning how to communicate that more clearly at the beginning. So maybe someone has a better way to overcome a particular hurdle or to sidestep a particular pothole that we may encounter. If they understand what the journey includes
Mm-hmm.
to get to that destination point a little more clearly at the beginning of it. So that's something that I'm working on
Okay.
even at this stage. Yeah.
Yeah. So just
Probably
because,
most especially at this stage.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Right. So he who speaks first appears right is one of those phrases I try
Yeah.
to remember in that. So even though we can kind of see the end as the leader, letting other people share first often changes our perspective. Like, oh, well, maybe that's okay too, right? And even if it takes us a little left or a little right, their involvement sometimes is the goal, even if it
Mhm.
takes us off the path for a little bit of time, right? If it's not that expensive or not that off the path, right?
Exactly.
Involving that team can be pretty important. Yeah. So one of my questions was, where are you still growing? It sounds like that's it right there.
It is. It is. I always, try to give myself and others that I'm coaching and developing verbal cues that can
Mm.
help kind of reset that moment of growth because sometimes behaviors and habits are so organic, that you have to be mindful of them. And I catch myself with this oft used phrase: trust the process. Please just trust the process.
Oh, okay.
And the minute I start to feel that coming out of my mouth, I know that that's my practice the pause moment because they may not understand what the process is yet. So how can they trust it? And so I'm working, through that very diligently and knew that I was using that quite a bit in my first
Uh,
year, stepping into this CEO role and hoping to hear it less and less as we continue to
I
move
see. I
forward.
see. So that became a
Mhm.
warning flag.
Yes,
If I'm saying this, that means I'm not doing actually what I want to be doing in terms of bringing
exactly.
the team together. Yeah. Very smart. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So that's interesting. I forget, what did you just call that? A prompt, a cue? What did you?
Yeah, yeah. It's
Okay.
it's just a little
Yeah.
prompt that when you hear
Uh
this,
huh.
that's your kind of trigger warning, like
Trigger warning.
hold on, you're about to
Yeah.
go down, a pathway that you need
Hmm.
to, pedal back on and reroute yourself. So
Yeah. So that's a trigger of sort of a road you don't want to go on. You've talked to me in the past about a practice you have that I think would just be great to share around, and your trigger conversation triggered me, of this practice that you have around grounding yourself. What does that look like? Because it sort of reminds me of this. Oh, that's right. I'm here and I need to be here. How do I get back here? And I think that leaders need more and more strategies of catching themselves when they're kind of going down the sliding board of demise. In a meeting when they're maybe getting emotional or starting to defend something, or there's all kinds of ways that as leaders we can sort of derail the team approach that we actually want to have happening. And I think you've got a really clever one that I'd love for you to share.
I again learned everything I know along the way from someone else, and just again put them in my little tool belt.
Yep, same.
Very early on, as mentioned, I was fortunate to step into a role with a corporation that very much invested in leadership development. And I went to a session that taught you about not your emotional roller coaster, which is a phrase we probably, gravitate toward a little bit more because that's the ups and the downs and the arounds and, the stomach clenches. But it was actually thinking about your emotions on an elevator.
Yeah.
So ideally, we all strive, we stay, at the Hilton Hotel or any other hotel we choose to stay at to get to the penthouse level. Everybody wants to get to the penthouse. You feel great if you're staying in the penthouse. It just imbues this, sense of happiness and excitement and achievement. So very, very positive. Nobody wants to stay in the basement, rarely, if
Mhm.
ever. So the lesson I learned, and this is literally a 30-year, component that I take with me personally and professionally through life, is choosing to have my ground floor when I'm pushing that button each and every morning to go about my day, to start my ground floor at curiosity.
Mm.
To me, curiosity is that midpoint between whether I go up or go down.
Yeah.
Curiosity is, what does the day have in store for me? What am I going to learn? What am I going to teach? Who am I going to meet? Curiosity is having maybe challenging meetings or scenarios pop up in the day. And rather than go down to the basement, because who wants to be down in the basement, staying curious and may not be exciting or happy or any of those other positive emotions, but staying curious about why did the conversation go that way? What was going on in that person's world today that prompted a different tone than I've experienced with them before? And so just why to me is one of, I think, my favorite words in the dictionary.
Mhm.
Why? just
Yeah.
and I think being curious is my starting point emotionally, and always asking why uh, is other stars, in the constellation, along with that North Star of positive intent, that just leads me through every day.
Yeah. Well, that intention, so, intentions come before actions. And I think we get in trouble as people, as leaders, when we act without intention. And so, what's so beautiful about what you're talking about, whether people use an elevator or a roller coaster as their metaphor, it doesn't matter. But the intention that you choose to start with is going to guide your actions, right? But if we start from action and then reverse to intention, we're always sort of going to be working from a place of regret or repair versus proaction and discovery. And so that's why I think what you shared is just so beautiful, and I'm sure has served you well in these 30 years of using it.
I think it has allowed me to build my empathy,
Hmm.
toward others, and certainly probably helped me to keep my blood pressure down,
Which is really good as a leader.
which is necessary, and just take that step back. I think I used this phrase earlier, and not that I'm one for, the clutch phrases, but I think my journey over the last, I would say, 6 years in true executive roles, and learning from some amazing leaders ahead of me, has been about practicing the pause.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm definitely a get it done type of personality, that A plus perfectionist. And so learning how to give myself the pause in speech, in action, and in thought, I think is something I'm looking forward to continue honing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you can't be curious and furious at the same time. Uh,
Exactly.
I practice that quite a lot at home. So, as a working parent with 4 kids, and I won't go into how many pets, things like that. Uh, there's a lot going on. A lot is coming at you, and you can be, triggered pretty easily. And so that intention of getting curious, what is this moment in, have for me in this moment? Why am I in this moment? What can I bring to this moment? Just getting curious about anything is going to shift your mindset. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that is a great lesson. Big takeaway right there for me. Thank you so much for sharing that. If I can shift gears with your permission,
Sure.
oh my gosh, I'm so interested to know about the organ donation aspect of your life. There are not many people who walk around as a living organ donor, and this is a community you are part of. I can only imagine this is an important aspect of your life, and I want to give you an opportunity to share that if you'd like to.
I would. This is probably where your listeners may have to give me a little grace and space, because it's a hard story to share without emotions.
Okay.
But if we all remember in March of 2020, what happened to our worlds,
Yeah.
um, imagine being a 23-year-old young woman going in for an eye appointment to be told, get to the emergency room as soon as possible.
Mm.
1 year out of college, having already battled kidney disease for a few years, was going into acute failure. Probably about 5 or 6 years earlier than that level was thought to be a hurdle for her to face.
Yeah.
This was a friend's daughter. And so several months later, with the world being under the pandemic cloud, much more challenging for them to deal with this health crisis than they would have otherwise.
Yeah.
I'm driving in a car with my own 17-year-old daughter at the time, and I get a text from this friend, a group text, a few of us, and the words were, "Please help, I'm a mom trying to save her daughter."
Oh.
So
Wow.
that's probably where that invisible Shira cape on my shoulders,
Yeah.
really felt very heavy. And I went home to my husband and I said, "How would you feel if I donated a kidney?" I mean, there was no, even
You
now
didn't
telling the story
you didn't say
sometimes,
I'm thinking about it. You said, "Hey, by
no,
the
no,
way." Yeah.
I want to do this. How do you feel? And what do you think? And we had to have some conversations to get him on board. But sharing the who and the why,
Wow.
um, was fairly a quick, marital moment. And I'll make it short. Fast forward from August of 2020 to the Friday before Martin Luther King Day, January 2021, when I got the call that I was approved.
Wow.
It took that many months of
Yeah, sure.
medical prodding
Not
and
fast.
poking and,
It's not
all
fast.
of
Yeah.
that. And I got to call my friend who knew I had stepped up to be tested, but they encouraged me along the way to not give false hope. And so I hadn't given her any updates since that initial, put me in, I'm going to try. The
Mm-hmm.
only thing I can do is try and step up and get tested for compatibility. I have always had the sticker on my driver's license, since 16 years old, and getting the capability of saying, should I not need use of my own organs, please feel free to give them
That's
to others.
very different than what you're talking about right now.
Correct.
Very.
Sharing with my children, my parents,
Yeah.
that this was a path I was heading down. I got asked why a lot, and I couldn't put it into any other phrase other than because I can.
Yeah.
So why not? Because I
Yeah.
can. I'm looking at my own 21 and 17-year-old children, and I would shudder to be their mother needing to save them and not be able to,
Right.
and have someone in our life who wouldn't at least try.
Try.
So on March 17th of 2021, I donated my right kidney. We actually did what's called a paired exchange because our physiology was different. So while I was healthy enough, they wanted to find a kidney that truly would fit her needs.
Sure.
And so we went into a national database, and we actually triggered 4 different matchings in the database. So in addition to my friend's daughter, 3 other patients in need of kidneys were able to get theirs as well. And we are all here 3.5 years later, living healthy lives. She is living her best life as now a young 27-year-old woman should, going from 4 years ago being on dialysis,
Mm-hmm.
hours a day, days per week, to coaching basketball, pursuing her career, living, laughing, and thriving.
That's an amazing story.
It's one that I feel honored to have been given the opportunity to step up and do. And I've become an advocate for living donor, education, and just encouraging people to learn more about it.
Yeah.
And you can live quite comfortably with one kidney, as I'm demonstrating, and somebody else out there can't.
Right. Right.
So I recently shared this story, as I mentioned, at a Lunch and Learn, which was about acts of selfless kindness.
Oh,
It didn't seem like it to me at the time. It wasn't. Where's the reciprocity in this? There was none.
right. You just went into
Um,
mama bear mode.
Mama bear mode,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Again, that share cape. If I can't save the entire world, if I can help save one life, and it
Right.
ended up being 4, with that particular scenario, um, then because I can. That's all. Just because I can, I was able to.
Yeah. That feels like maybe your tagline, because I can, for many of the things that you've shared today. Because I can. You're
Whoa,
raising
Kristen,
money.
you're getting me on that one.
Because I can. You're stepping up, stepping in, and filling what's needed, doing what growing yourself, right? And because you can, your can changes over time. One of the things I noticed as I was preparing today, the background on your LinkedIn profile. When we know better, we do better. That's been a phrase that I've said for decades. I've never seen it anywhere else. Where does that come from for you?
um, Again, twisting and turning the personal and professional development, because it's also intricately interwoven. Mentioning some of my, strengths, being, a strategic minded leader, being a wooer. So that great blend of both, the tactical and the human relational components needed for success. Learner has always also been one of my top 5s through all 3
Yeah.
decades of my career pathway. And when we believe we know it all, we get in our own way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we learn more, we're responsible for doing more, and sharing and influencing and trying to create a ripple effect through that. To me, that is just it's a responsibility that I feel I have. So
Because you can.
because I can.
Yeah. Wow. Mary, I don't know what else to say. People would be watching us, they would see tears and other liquids falling here. This is probably as good as it's going to get for me today, Mary. This was a fabulous conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for allowing me to share a little bit of me with your listeners and your circles, and for always in every conversation that we have had to date, giving me something else to take away from it that will allow me to learn more and do more.
Oh, well, that's such a compliment. Thank you for that. I took away, speaking of takeaways, wow, where do I begin? Well, I'll begin with discovery. So this is your decade of discovery, and I challenge anyone listening, what is this your decade for? Maybe it is discovery, maybe it is recovery, maybe it is renewal, maybe it is fill in the blank, but labeling it is powerful. Naming is framing, my friends, and if we don't have intention, then our actions are aimless. And so Mary's decade of discovery has turned into new letters behind your name, a new legacy to invigorate and create with the Whitaker Center. Your positive intent for greater good as a North Star, as a leader, is something that all young leaders should be thinking about and listening to, because friendly is not friend. And that is such a big takeaway for folks who struggle with being liked. That fear of not being liked as a young leader is so strong. And I think showing folks that there is a path out of that is a real takeaway today. And our intention of curiosity, that emotional elevator, is really just a great visual. Thank you for sharing that today. And Mary, because you can, I just keep coming back to that. I'm just so blessed that you were here with us today. If people want to follow up with you, learn more about the Whitaker Center, where should they go?
Well, I'm certainly available on every social media channel you can find, and hopefully you will see reiterations of everything we talked about today, that I, am what I say. What you see is what you get. And then whitakercenter.org, our newly minted website that is just so hopefully user-friendly and exciting. And we want to be a destination of choice for our community, welcome and inclusive to all. So we hope to see some of your listeners and to visit us soon.
Outstanding. And they will find your smiling face there. Beautiful.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you for joining me today for another great Hustle Conversation with the Central PA Executive. You can find out more about my guest in the show notes. And if you liked the episode or have something to add to our conversation, please find me on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Subscribe, rate, and review. Remember, leadership is best practiced in community. You know a leader who needs to hear something from this episode, so pay it forward and send it to them today. Don't wait. Until next time, the best leaders not only lead well, they live well and learn well. Bye now.